All right, so in this step, all we're going to be doing is setting up, or I'm sorry, decorating our base scene here. So if you already have a base scene that you've decorated that you want to keep using, you can just use that scene. You don't need to decorate a new one. However, if you would like to get credit for your check setup button, you'll need to open that scene and then hit check setup. If, however, you would like to use a new temple base scene or just want to decorate another level, um, we have this here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our project panel. Instead of the scenes folder this time, we're going to find that prefabs folder under temple or alien, again, if you're in the alien scene. And then we're going to have this folder of prefabs here. So every folder here, except for this enemies folder, because obviously this contains enemy prefabs, is going to have a prefab or prefabs within it that are classified as decorations for our purposes. So that means that we need to just add a minimum of 5 of these to our scene for the check setup button to work, but you are more than welcome to add as many as you'd like. You are not, of course, limited to just these prefabs, so there is some pretty fun stuff in here. It does change depending on what environment you have selected. But you are welcome to use any prefabs you have within your project. That includes our main prefabs folder with the props and all this stuff. But also, if you have any other environments that have decoration prefabs that you'd like to use, you are again welcome to use any of those. So what I'm going to do now is just with a few of these, I'm going to walk you through some tricks on how to place game objects, how to turn them, resize them, and generally, make them look the way we want them to inside of our level. So what I'm going to start with is just a simple vase. So I'm going to click it and drag it right out into my scene in order to have control over where that's placed. While I have that object selected and my mouse in the scene view, if I tap the F key, that will zoom my camera in on the object. Now I can make sure I know that I'm looking at the right thing. So there's a few shortcuts or keyboard shortcuts that we can use to make our life a little bit easier here. While we have the object selected, if we tap the W key, obviously you see nothing changed. That's because the W key is what gives us this movement gizmo. And this movement gizmo allows us to move our game object in the 3 directions here: the X axis, or left and right, the Z axis, or forward and back, and the Y axis, up and down. That's going to be kind of the basis for all 3 of our tools we're about to go over. So keep in mind those 3 axes: X, Z, and Y. But yes, you press W to get the movement gizmo, which again allows us to move our object around our scene. If we tap the E key, we get the rotation gizmo, which gives us these 4 circles kind of surrounding our object here. The red circle will rotate us around the X axis. The Z, or the blue circle, will rotate us around the Z axis, and the green will rotate us around the Y axis. The white circle will allow us to rotate around the direction that our camera is facing. So you'll notice if I'm facing it like this, and I drag the white circle, it'll rotate it, left and right, kind of like the camera's looking. If I go underneath it like so and do the same thing, it rotates it again in the direction based on the camera. And then if we tap the R key, that brings up the scaling gizmo. It again functions on the same principle, that the red line grows in the X-axis, or left and right. The blue line will grow us in the Z-axis, or forward and back. And the green line will grow up and down in the Y-axis. If you click on the white box and drag to the right, you'll grow in all 3 at the same time. And if you drag to the left, you'll shrink all 3 at the same time. There is also what is called the rect editor. If you tap the T key, and what this does is it gives us this little rectangle that surrounds our vase or whatever game object. And this works on the same principle as some image editing software you may have used before, where if you want to resize an image, you click the corners and you drag it. This works the exact same way. We can also click the edge to just drag in one direction, like so. But again, those corners will allow you to do both at the same time. So that can be very useful. Sometimes our scaling gizmo doesn't give us the control we want, and the rect editor does. One last tip before I turn you loose to start decorating on your own is that while you're doing any of these 4 movements, the rotation, scaling, or movement, If you hold the control key, you will make use of what's called the grid. So if I'm holding control, when I move my object, it's going to jump at intervals of, I believe, 0.25 units. So that means 4 jumps would be 1 whole unit. That means that you can guarantee you're moving exactly 1 unit every 4 jumps instead of kind of estimating by looking. This also applies to rotation. So when you hold control and you start rotating an object, it jumps at intervals of 15 degrees. So that means that you can know exactly when you hit a right angle or 90 degrees, or a straight line along that circle is 180. That can be very useful when you want a very precise rotation. And then same thing with scaling, it will do the jumps at 0.25 units. And that's it. That should be all you need to go ahead and start decorating. The one thing that I will recommend you do before you decorate, and in fact, I would say that this is a requirement, but again, what you want to do is on your world game object, you want to right click, hit create empty, and then rename this object here from game object to decorations. This is just going to help you organize your scene so you don't have a bunch of loose game objects hanging around, because once we have this object here, we can take whatever prefab we just added to our scene and simply drag and drop it onto decorations. That will allow us to collapse the game object and hide those in our hierarchy so we're not dealing with a whole bunch of stuff cluttered up here. So now I'm going to go ahead and decorate my base scene. I'm not going to go too crazy with it, but I'm going to fast forward through that, and then I'll check in with you once I'm done. Oh, actually, before I completely turn you loose, there's one other very useful thing I forgot to mention, and that's the ability to duplicate game objects. So while you have an object selected, if you tap Control or Command and then hit the D key on that object, you will create a duplicate, which is just an exact copy, and then you will automatically select the duplicated object. So if you want to place multiple of a single type of object, in your scene, and you don't want to have to keep dragging them out, you can just tap Control or Command D, and that will make a copy that you can then mess with as you need. Okay, like I said, I'm not going to go all that crazy decorating things, but the important thing is that you add a minimum of 5 of those decoration objects. And of course, once you've got all of them in your scene, maybe it's a good thing I forgot to do it while I wasn't recording audio. We want to make sure that we grab all of those prefab objects, not the player or the dungeon gate or the player camera. So I would maybe move those above our world object. But now all of this stuff down here, as long as those 3 objects that we don't want moved are separated, we can hold shift and click the top one and then click the bottom one, and that will select everything in the middle, and then we can drag all of that stuff into the decorations object. Once we have that there, that's all we need to do, so go ahead and save your scene.